Stench. Stench is basically the Pokemon equivalent of weaponized body odor. This ability gives each attack a 10% chance to make the target flinch, turning bad personal hygiene into a legitimate battle strategy. Pokemon like Stunky and Trubbish emit such a horrific smell that opponents physically recoil when hit. Outside of battle, it reduces wild Pokemon encounters when the stinky Pokemon lead your party. The flinch chance is low enough that competitive players rarely build strategies around it, but high enough that when it activates at a crucial moment, your opponent will never forgive you. Drizzle. Drizzle is the ability that turns the battlefield into Seattle weather immediately upon entry. Pokemon with this ability summon rain, powering up water-type moves by 50%, weakening fire-type moves, and making thunder hit with perfect accuracy. Originally exclusive to Kyogre, this weather-changing ability later spread to Pelipper, creating instant climate change that would make meteorologists question their degrees. It's essentially playing Pokemon with a personal rain cloud, allowing water types to dominate while fire types wonder why they bothered showing up. In competitive play, it forms the backbone of rain teams that turn water into an overwhelming tactical advantage. Speed Boost. Speed Boost is the ability equivalent of drinking an espresso shot every turn. Pokemon with this ability have their speed stat increased each turn they remain in battle, turning already fast Pokemon like Blaziken and Ninjask into absolute speed demons over time. It creates this wonderful tension where opponents are racing against the clock. Either they knock you out quickly or you'll eventually outspeed their entire team. Blaziken's combination of speed boost and power was so overwhelming that it earned a ticket straight to the banned list in competitive play. The ability represents momentum in its purest form. The longer the battle goes, the more unstoppable you become. Battle Armor. Battle Armor is the ability for Pokemon that refuse to acknowledge lucky shots. It provides complete immunity to critical hits, ensuring that damage remains predictable rather than occasionally spiking due to random chance. Pokemon like Drapion and Armaldo wear their protective plating with pride, never suffering from those annoying moments when damage suddenly doubles for no good reason. It's essentially protective equipment for Pokemon who believe in skill over luck, the competitive equivalent of saying no flukes allowed. While it's not the flashiest ability, Battle Armor provides consistent reliability that can be crucial in high-stakes battles where a single critical hit might otherwise determine the outcome. Sturdy. Sturdy is the ability for Pokemon that just refuse to go down in one hit. As long as they're at full health, Pokemon with Sturdy will survive any attack with just 1 HP remaining, no matter how powerful the move. It also provides immunity to one-hit KO moves like Fissure. Pokemon like Golem and Skarmory use this ability to ensure they get at least one turn to fight back, no matter what gets thrown at them. In competitive play, this ability transformed from merely useful to genuinely strategic when players realized they could pair it with moves like Endeavor and Quick Attack for a cheesy last resort strategy. Damp. Damp is the ability for Pokemon that don't believe in going out with a bang. It prevents all explosive moves like Self-Destruct and Explosion from being used by any Pokemon on the field, essentially creating a no suicide bombing zone. Pokemon like Golduck and Parasect emit enough moisture to keep even the most volatile compounds from detonating. It's so situational that it's basically useless 99% of the time, but in that 1% when your opponent's Electrode was planning to go nuclear as a last resort, you get to watch their face as they realize their backup plan just got dampened. Literally. Outside competitive play, it can prevent Wild Graveler from self-destructing before you can catch them, which is a small but appreciated convenience for collectors. Limber. Limber is the ability for Pokemon that are essentially living yoga instructors. It provides complete immunity to paralysis, preventing that annoying status condition that reduces speed and can cause full movement failure. Pokemon like Persian and Hitmonlee are so flexible and limber that electric shocks or stun spores simply can't lock up their muscles. It's a straightforward ability that doesn't do anything fancy. It just ensures that one particular status condition will never ruin your day. In a metagame where Thunder Wave is common, this passive immunity can be surprisingly valuable. Sandveil. Sandveil is the ability for Pokemon that believe defense is best achieved by throwing sand in your opponent's eyes. During sandstorms, it increases evasion by 20%, making attacks more likely to miss these sand-shrouded Pokemon. Sandslash and Garchomp use this ability to become even more annoying during their preferred weather condition. It combines with the inherent sandstorm damage to non-rock, ground, or steel types to create a double whammy of passive frustration. The ability was so annoying in competitive play that some formats banned it for being too luck-based. The message is clear. Sometimes the best defense isn't a good offense, but just making yourself really hard to hit. Static. Static is the ability that punishes physical attackers for not wearing rubber gloves. When a Pokemon with static is hit by a move that makes physical contact, there's a 30% chance the attacker will become paralyzed. Pikachu and Ampharos carry so much electricity in their bodies that simply touching them can result in a nasty shock. It's essentially a passive deterrent against physical attacks, creating a 30% chance that the attacker will suddenly find their speed quartered and a 25% chance they'll be fully paralyzed on subsequent turns. In competitive play, this ability turns otherwise straightforward attacks into risk-reward calculations. For example, is landing that close combat worth potentially losing your sweeper to paralysis? The message being sent is clear. Sometimes the most dangerous thing about electricity isn't the initial shock, but the lingering effects afterward. Volt Absorb. Volt Absorb is the ability equivalent of installing a solar panel on your house, except for electricity instead of sunlight. When hit by an electric-type move, a Pokemon with this ability restores 25% of its maximum HP instead of taking damage. Jolteon and Zapdos can thank Volt Absorb for turning would-be super effective Thunderbolts into impromptu healing sessions. It creates fascinating team dynamics where electric-type teammates can actually help these Pokemon by attacking them with weak electric moves, essentially providing in-battle first aid. It's the competitive equivalent of turning your opponent's resources against them, making every electric attack a gift rather than a threat. The ability is particularly valuable in a metagame where electric-type coverage is common, turning type matchup tables upside down and forcing opponents to rely on their backup plans. Water Absorb. Water Absorb is Volt Absorb's hydrated cousin. When hit by a water-type move, a Pokemon with this ability restores 25% of its maximum HP instead of taking damage. Vaporeon and Quagsire can convert enemy Surfs and Hydro Pumps into healing springs, completely negating what would otherwise be powerful attacks. It creates an immediate strategic problem for water-type attackers who suddenly find their stab moves not only ineffective but actively counterproductive. In competitive play, this ability can single-handedly shut down water-type sweepers, forcing them to either switch out or rely on non-water coverage moves that deal significantly less damage. Oblivious. Oblivious is the ability for Pokemon that are too dense to be manipulated emotionally. It provides immunity to Infatuation, Taunt, and Intimidate, essentially making the Pokemon immune to psychological warfare. Pokemon like Snorlax and Numel are so oblivious to social cues that they don't even notice when others are trying to manipulate them. In competitive play, this provides a niche but valuable immunity to disruption strategies, allowing these Pokemon to continue setting up or using support moves even when taunted. The ability essentially rewards social cluelessness with tactical advantages, which is rarely the case in real life. Cloud 9. Cloud 9 is the ability that tells weather effects, not today, thank you. Pokemon with this ability neutralize all weather conditions while they're on the field, shutting down the effects of rain, sun, sandstorms, and hail. Psyduck and Licky Licky create a bubble of normal weather conditions in which special weather-based abilities and moves lose their bonuses. It's essentially a portable weather cancellation system, making Cloud 9 users the bane of weather teams everywhere. In competitive play, simply switching in a Cloud 9 Pokemon can completely dismantle an opponent's weather-based strategy, turning their Kyogre or Groudon into very expensive normal types with no special weather perks. Compound Eyes. Compound Eyes is the ability for trainers who don't trust their Pokemon's accuracy. It boosts move accuracy by 30%, turning the notoriously unreliable Thunder from a 70% accuracy gamble into a much more dependable 91% chance to hit. Butterfree and Galvantula are the poster children for this ability, using it to land Sleep Powder or the powered-up Thunder respectively with much more reliability. The ability transforms high-risk, high-reward moves into simply high-reward moves, removing much of the luck element that normally balances their power. It's a straightforward but effective ability that turns probability in your favor. Insomnia. Insomnia is the ability for Pokemon that have had way too much caffeine. It provides complete immunity to sleep, preventing opponents from using moves like Spore or Sleep Powder to take the Pokemon out of commission for several turns. Pokemon like Honchkrow and Murkrow are so perpetually wired that they simply cannot fall asleep no matter what sleep-inducing techniques are used against them. It's a straightforward defensive ability that doesn't do anything fancy, it just ensures that one particularly annoying status condition will never ruin your day. In a competitive environment where sleep can remove a Pokemon from play for multiple turns, this passive immunity can be surprisingly valuable. Color Change. Color Change is the ability for Pokemon with severe identity issues. When hit by a move, the Pokemon's type changes to match the move's type, creating a constantly shifting type matchup. Kecleon is the only Pokemon with this ability, turning from a normal type into whatever just hit it. Fire after being hit by Flamethrower, Water after Surf, and so on. While this sounds potentially useful, in practice it often works against the user, turning neutral hits into super effective hits on the next turn, so it essentially forces you to switch out constantly or play an elaborate type matchup guessing game. Immunity. Immunity is the ability for Pokemon with industrial strength stomach lining. It provides complete immunity to poison, preventing that annoying status condition that causes damage over time. Pokemon like Snorlax and Zangoose have such robust immune systems that they can digest literally anything without getting sick. It's a straightforward ability that doesn't do anything complex, it just ensures that one particular status condition will never bother you. In competitive play, this means toxic stalling strategies and poison-spreading moves like Toxic Spikes become completely irrelevant. Flashfire. Flashfire is the ability equivalent of trying to put out a fire with gasoline. When hit by a fire-type move, a Pokemon with this ability becomes completely immune to that attack and gets a 50% boost to its own fire-type moves. Pokemon like Ninetales and Houndoom essentially tell fire-type attackers thanks for the power-up, as they absorb what should have been super effective damage and turn it into offensive fuel. It's like trying to fight a pyromaniac by giving them matches. Not only is it ineffective, but also actively counterproductive. The ability creates fascinating team dynamics where fire-type teammates can actually help these Pokemon by attacking them with weak fire moves, essentially providing in-battle power-ups. Flashfire turns would-be weaknesses into strategic advantages, making fire versus fire matchups particularly ironic. Shield Dust. Shield Dust is the ability for Pokemon that refuse to accept any additional effects from moves. The dust coating these Pokemon neutralizes secondary effects like flinching, burning, poisoning, or stat drops that would normally come with certain attacks. Pokemon like Dustox and Vivillon might still take damage from a flamethrower, but they'll never suffer the 10% burn chance that comes with it. It's an insurance policy against adding insult to injury effects, ensuring that damage remains just damage without any unwanted bonuses. In competitive play, this means moves are evaluated purely on their base damage with no gambling on lucky secondary effects. It's the Pokemon equivalent of saying I'll take the hit but none of the baggage that comes with it, straightforwardly accepting the primary consequences while rejecting all the extras. Own Tempo. Own Tempo is the ability for Pokemon that march to the beat of their own drum. It provides immunity to confusion, preventing that annoying condition that makes Pokemon hurt themselves a third of the time. Pokemon like Smeargle and Espeon are so in tune with their own internal rhythm that outside forces can't disorient them. In later generations, it also granted immunity to Intimidate, adding psychological resilience to its benefits. In competitive play, it provides a niche but valuable immunity to confusion-inducing moves and abilities, allowing these Pokemon to continue functioning normally even when hit by Confuse Ray or Flatter. The ability rewards mental independence with tactical advantages, which is actually a pretty good life lesson buried in a game mechanic. Suction Cups. Suction Cups is the ability for Pokemon that refuse to be forcibly switched out. It prevents moves like Whirlwind and Roar from working, as well as items and abilities that would force the Pokemon to leave the battlefield. Pokemon like Octillery and Lileep use their adhesive properties to literally stick to their position, immune to all attempts to blow or drag them away. It's a highly specialized ability that's useless most of the time, but invaluable against specific strategies. In competitive play, it allows these Pokemon to completely shut down phasing tactics that rely on forced switching to disrupt setup sweepers. Intimidate. Intimidate is the ability for Pokemon that believe making a scary face is a legitimate battle strategy, and they're right. Upon entering battle, they lower the opponent's attack stat by 1 stage, essentially psyching them out before the fight even begins. Gyarados, Salamence, and Incineroar have built competitive careers around switching in and out repeatedly, intimidating everything in sight like playground bullies. The message is clear. Sometimes it's not about what you can do, but how scary you look doing it. The ability creates an immediate advantage upon entry, making it particularly valuable in the team preview area where switching is a core part of strategy. Shadow Tag. Shadow Tag is the ability for Pokemon that believe you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave, and use it as a viable battle strategy. It prevents opponents from switching out or fleeing, trapping them in battle until either they or the Shadow Tag user are defeated. Wobbuffet and Gothitelle use this ability to create inescapable situations where opponents are forced to deal with them directly rather than switching to a counter. It was so overwhelmingly powerful in competitive play that it was restricted to specific Pokemon and later nerfed to only affect non-ghost types. The ability creates forced matchups that can decide entire battles, making it simultaneously one of the most strategic and most frustrating abilities in the game. Rough Skin. Rough Skin is the ability that punishes physical attackers for not wearing protective gloves. When a Pokemon with Rough Skin is hit by a move that makes physical contact, the attacker loses 1/8 of its maximum HP. Pokemon like Druddigon and Garchomp have such abrasive outer bodies that simply touching them causes significant injury. It's the passive-aggressive version of hitting back. You didn't technically attack them, they just hurt themselves by attacking you. In competitive play, this creates a damage tax on physical attackers, making them think twice about using multi-hit physical moves or low-damage priority attacks. Wonder Guard. Wonder Guard is the ability that makes Shedinja simultaneously the most fragile and most invincible Pokemon in existence. It makes the Pokemon immune to all damaging moves except those that are super effective against it. For Shedinja, with its unique Bug Ghost typing, this means only Fire, Flying, Rock, Ghost, and Dark moves can damage it, everything else just bounces off. The catch? Shedinja only has 1 HP, so any damage at all means instant knockout. In competitive play, Shedinja creates fascinating team dynamics where it can completely wall certain Pokemon while being instantly defeated by others, turning matches into a puzzle of coverage moves and type matchups. The ability represents specialized immunity taken to its logical extreme. Levitate. Levitate is the ability for Pokemon who decide that touching the ground is beneath them, both literally and figuratively. It grants immunity to ground-type moves by keeping the Pokemon perpetually airborne, protecting them from earthquakes and other terrestrial threats. Pokemon like Rotom and Bronzong float above the battlefield, smugly watching ground-types struggle to affect them. It's like having a permanent the floor is lava mindset, except instead of being a childhood game, it's a legitimate battle strategy that has saved countless electric and poison types from super effective stab earthquakes. In a game where touching the ground can sometimes mean instant death, Levitate users have mastered the art of social distancing from the battlefield itself. The ability grants a free type immunity without any corresponding weakness, making it one of the more straightforwardly beneficial abilities in the game. Effect Spore. Effect Spore is the ability for Pokemon that believe in spreading their problems to others. When hit by a move that makes physical contact, there's a 30% chance the attacker will be afflicted with either poison, paralysis, or sleep. Pokemon like Parasect and Amoonguss release spores when disturbed, potentially causing a variety of unpleasant status conditions. It's a game of status condition roulette where physical attackers gamble with their well-being every time they make contact. In competitive play, this ability turns otherwise straightforward attacks into risk-reward calculations like, is landing that power-up punch worth potentially losing your sweeper to sleep? The random nature of which status condition activates makes it hard to plan around, adding an element of chaos to otherwise predictable matchups. Synchronize. Synchronize is the ability equivalent of, if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. When the Pokemon is burned, paralyzed, or poisoned, it automatically inflicts the same status condition on the Pokemon that caused it. Espeon and Umbreon use this ability to ensure that status spreaders suffer from their own medicine. It creates a mutual deterrence that makes opponents think twice before trying to poison or paralyze these Pokemon. In the overworld, it also increases the chance of encountering wild Pokemon with the same nature as your Synchronized user, making it valuable for nature hunters. The ability turns status conditions from one-sided advantages into mutually assured destruction, fundamentally changing the calculation of when to use status moves. Clear Body. Clear Body is the ability for Pokemon that refuse to be statistically undermined. It prevents other Pokemon from lowering any of the user's stats, creating immunity to moves like Intimidate, Charm, or Tail Whip. Pokemon like Metagross and Regirock maintain their natural stat levels no matter what debuffing techniques are used against them. It's essentially statistical integrity in ability form, ensuring that your Pokemon's numbers remain exactly as they should be. In competitive play, this provides valuable protection against setup strategies that rely on lowering opponent stats before sweeping. The ability creates a reliable stat floor that can be crucial in calculating damage outputs and survival chances in high-level play. Natural Cure. Natural Cure is the ability for Pokemon that treat switching out as a trip to the spa. When a Pokemon with this ability switches out of battle, all of its status conditions are automatically cured. Pokemon like Celebi and Blissey can shake off burns, poison, or paralysis simply by taking a brief break from the battlefield. It's essentially a free reset button for status conditions, creating a natural immunity to status-based War of Attrition strategies. In competitive play, this makes these Pokemon excellent status absorbers. They can intentionally take a Thunder Wave or Toxic that would have hit a more vulnerable teammate, then switch out to instantly cure themselves. The ability rewards strategic switching with improved longevity, making it particularly valuable in the Team Preview era where switching is a core part of strategy. Lightning Rod. Lightning Rod is the ability equivalent of installing a metal pole on your roof during a thunderstorm, but doing it on purpose. When an electric-type move is used in battle, a Pokemon with Lightning Rod draws it in regardless of the intended target, gaining a special attack boost instead of taking damage. It turns would-be attacks into power-ups with Pokemon like Manectric and Alolan Marowak volunteering as living surge protectors. In doubles battles, it creates a natural alliance with electric types, protecting allies while simultaneously powering up. It's the competitive equivalent of turning your opponent's resources against them, making every electric attack a gift rather than a threat. The ability creates fascinating team dynamics and forces opponents to reconsider their electric coverage, fundamentally changing how certain matchups play out. Serene Grace. Serene Grace is the ability that turns battles into exercises in statistical frustration. It doubles the chance of moves' secondary effects occurring, transforming 10% flinch chances into 20% and making Air Slash from Togekiss a 60% flinch machine. Jirachi and Togekiss built competitive careers around this ability, creating strategies based on preventing opponents from moving rather than directly damaging them. The ability turns luck from a factor into a strategy, leading to situations where opponents can lose without ever getting to attack, which is either brilliant or absolutely rage-inducing depending on which side of the flinch you're on. It represents probability manipulation in its purest form, rewarding those who understand that sometimes consistency is more important than raw power. Swift Swim. Swift Swim is the ability for Pokemon that believe swimming in the rain somehow makes sense. When it's raining, Pokemon with this ability have their speed doubled, turning normally middling water types into blitzing threats that outpace traditionally fast Pokemon. Ludicolo and Kingdra transform from decent options into terrifying sweepers under the right conditions. It's essentially the aquatic version of Chlorophyll, creating weather-dependent speed demons that can sweep entire teams if the conditions are right. In competitive play, these Pokemon are often paired with rainsetters like Politoed or Kyogre, creating teams dedicated to making the most of precipitation advantages. Chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is basically a plant's way of saying "watch this" when the sun comes out. In sunny weather, Pokemon with this ability double their speed stat, turning normally sluggish grass types into blitzing threats. Venusaur and Lilligant transform from garden decorations into speedsters that outpace traditionally fast Pokemon. It's the botanical version of a solar-powered sports car, perfectly environmentally friendly until it's blasting past everything on the battlefield. Competitive players often pair these Pokemon with sunsetters like Torkoal or Groudon, creating teams that are basically elaborate excuses to watch plants break the sound barrier. The ability creates fascinating weather-dependent strategies, making these Pokemon feast or famine competitors who are either overwhelming or underwhelming depending on the battlefield conditions. Illuminate. Illuminate is the ability that makes absolutely no competitive sense whatsoever. In battle, it does literally nothing. Zero, zilch, nada. Outside of battle, it increases the rate of wild Pokemon encounters, which most players actively try to avoid with repels. Pokemon like Staryu and Chinchou glow brightly, attracting more wild battles but offering no advantage once those battles begin. Competitive players see Illuminate as the universal signal that a Pokemon wasn't designed with serious battling in mind, since any ability would be better than nothing. It's one of those abilities that makes you wonder if the developers were trying to create deliberate disadvantages, or if they simply couldn't think of anything else for glowing Pokemon to do besides attract attention. Trace. Trace is the ability equivalent of anything you can do, I can do too. When entering battle, the Pokemon copies its opponent's ability, essentially becoming a functional duplicate in terms of special traits. Gardevoir and Porygon 2 use this ability to adapt to whatever they're facing, potentially turning opponent strengths into shared advantages. It's like the ultimate form of battlefield adaptation, not just countering the opponent's strategy, but literally appropriating part of it. The ability creates fascinating mind games where the value of your own ability depends entirely on what you're facing, sometimes resulting in significant upgrades, and other times in disappointing downgrades. In competitive play, it keeps opponents guessing about exactly what they're facing, since the copied ability could completely change the matchup dynamics. Huge Power. Huge Power is the ability equivalent of steroid abuse in the Pokemon world. It straight up doubles the Pokemon's attack stat, turning even the cute, innocent-looking Azumarill into a heavyweight champion of the world. It's not about technique or strategy, it's just raw, overwhelming power that makes physical attackers hit like they're carrying sledgehammers. Competitively, it turns Azumarill from a blue bunny with water balloons into a terrifying Aqua Jet user that leaves trainers wondering what just bulldozed their team. The ability name doesn't even try to be subtle, it's Huge Power. Not big power or substantial power, because Game Freak wanted to make it very clear. This rabbit hits way harder than it has any right to. It's one of the most straightforwardly powerful abilities in the game with no conditions or drawbacks, just a pure, unadulterated stat boost that transforms otherwise mediocre Pokemon into legitimate threats. And that's just the first half of Generation 3's groundbreaking abilities. These passive traits fundamentally changed how Pokemon battles worked, adding a new strategic layer beyond just types and moves. Stay tuned for Part 2, where we'll cover the remaining abilities that help define the modern Pokemon battle system.